This is I actually one of the very first webinars I ever did back in 2007. And it's always interesting. I've done it a couple of times since then. It's always interesting to me to go back and to look at my previous work, my emphasis, my own growth and evolution as a person, as a therapist over the years. And I think a lot of the principles in this stay pretty consistent, but there's a tone in some of it that as I was going over and preparing for this evening, I thought about a difference or a distinction in my tone, my own tone with this work. I think of this webinar, getting the support you need and deserve, this broadcast. I think of it as something of an empowerment webinar. So often early in my career, parents felt so disempowered, not able to stand up to or deal with family members that were discouraging or critical or judgmental. Also feeling limited in their ability to assert themselves in the relationship with their child. And so this webinar really speaks to that population, that parent that has those particular challenges. So with that, let's get into it. And there's a lot of this ended up becoming one of the chapters of my book, and so I just used some of the quotes from the book to illustrate this. And this first one says, "What surrounds you in life is a manifestation of what you think you deserve. It won't work to ask to be treated a certain way by others. We have to require it in order to get it." And again, I think that this is this moment. I know I spent a lot of my life asking, pleading, threatening, making very, very strong statements to those people in my life to set certain boundaries. And I realized at a certain point, somewhere around 2010, at a very core level, that I had to be able to walk away, that I had to be able to shut off conversations, perhaps even relationships, if they were going to approach me in a way that I didn't feel like I deserved and that was okay for me. And so it goes beyond what I call talking about, philosophizing about, asking for, and orally, verbally setting boundaries. And it goes actually to a more profound behavioral change. And I really do think, as I'm past 50 years old now, I look back and I think we grow out of certain things. We grow out of certain behaviors, relationships, situations. And there are many goodbyes in our life. It doesn't mean that we don't love the people in our life and we're not grateful for them, but sometimes we have to move beyond them. So I think that's at the core of what I think about when I think about this particular topic, about getting the support that you need and deserve. I talk about the right of a parent. Again, this idea to empower parents. Number one, we have rights as parents to be treated with respect. Right? That's something you can assert. Sometimes when it goes on for a very long time in our life, the change that we make in our lives is going to be treated or responded to with great resistance and oftentimes an escalation in the negative behaviors. And so again, we have to really walk out of the situation. And with our children, it becomes especially challenging because if they're under the age of 18, we can't just walk out of the room. We can't just not have them live with us. So there is a challenge in that. But we can get to a place where we stop allowing our children to talk to us a certain way, to treat us a certain way, hang up the phone if something is going to continue, when we've reached our limit, right, our capacity. Number two, we have a right to know where our kids are, who their friends are, and who they're with at any time. I want to say this is specific, of course, to adolescents, right, or younger children. As children become 18 and older, we don't have those kinds of rights. But it's this idea that our children sometimes are successful and kind of arguing for this freedom that they want in our lives, and we have a right to ask questions, to oversee our children and their experience. We have a right, number three, to demonstrate we care by occasionally verifying or spot checking our children's whereabouts. We may, for example, call host parents at parties or overnight stays. Again, I think we become paralyzed at times when our children say, "You don't trust me." And we have no obligation to trust, right? But something about that freezes so many parents, right? They feel like they're responsible for their child's decreasing self-esteem if we don't trust them. We can just own it. And you don't have to be right about it. Being right about it would mean that you would be arguing for or justifying the thought process instead of saying, this is just where I'm at right now, right? I need this for me. We have the right to set a curfew and enforce it with restrictions and loss of privileges. Again, I think that goes for a lot of rules, but there are a lot of parents who, in the face of their children's well-honed manipulations, kind of fall prey to that idea that I can't do it because my child is going to be upset or discouraged. We have a right to not condone any alcohol or drug usage and to say no attendance at activities where alcohol or drug usage might occur. I've had parents ask me, even after Evoke and Aftercare, they're going to a concert or they're going to this party where we know there's going to be drugs and alcohol. And you just have a right to say, I'm not comfortable supporting that. I'm not okay with that. I want to be very clear. I'm not telling you you should or have to do any of these things. I'm just giving you psychological permission to assert yourself. We have the right we have the right to make mistakes and or change our mind. I think this one is still so fundamental to my thinking, to my idea. This goes along with the idea of learning to be wrong, learning to lose, right? We can be paralyzed, hamstrung, held hostage by the idea that we're not allowed to make mistakes, to change our minds, to change what we had originally agreed to, right? We have new information, we have a new awareness, a new experience, and you're allowed to adjust to that. And at the same time, I think a finer look at this would say, and your child has a right to be upset about it, to not like it, to be disappointed, to be frustrated or upset about that change. I think that the tripping point for a lot of parents is we would try to talk our child out of those feelings and explain or justify that change. You just have a right to be the human that you are. More about your rights. We have the right to ask questions and expect answers about all the things which may affect our children. I'm specifically thinking about this, for example, with therapists or teachers, right? I think all of us sometimes, maybe not all of us, but many of us sometimes have this experience with authority figures in our children's lives that we end up getting small with, right? And it becomes a regressive experience for us. That's why I always say you have a right to ask difficult, challenging questions to your therapist at Evoke. You have a right to ask difficult questions to me, to the aftercare admissions folks, to the home therapist, to the teachers in your children's lives. We have a right to monitor all school-related activities, academic behavior, and social. Again, I think there's a tone here that sounds very oppressive and controlling, and I'm not saying you have to do that, but I'm speaking to that parent who feels afraid to assert themselves in these places, right? You're allowed to look in on, to pay attention to. I know for myself, as I grew older and more experienced, I actually let go. Early in my life, everything was a nail and I was always a hammer. And so for me, I was moving in the opposite direction. But my early experience with parents is they were becoming paralyzed, limited, disempowered by their own fears, anxieties, shame, perhaps. We have a right to know and consult with adults who influence our children's lives, coaches, employers, teachers, youth group leaders, ministers, and counselors. Right? I think that's another point around this regressive experience we have around authority figures, even as adults. I know one time I spent the day with one of my children in middle school going around to their classes. And I was there, present, of course, in their classes. And even with me there, I was surprised to see how punitive one teacher in particular was to the students. And I after school, shared that with the vice principal, the one that had given me permission to do that. And we hear our children complain about our teachers, complain about their teachers, complain about people in their lives, and this allows us, this idea, this particular right gives us permission. We have the right to have family rules and consistently enforce them with appropriate consequences. A lot of people, again, will ask me about specific rules. They'll say, should I require my child to come to church or synagogue with me? Should I require them to come to family events and so forth? And my answer is yes, you have a right to do that. I think there are other questions you can also ask, like, should I do that? In other words, what's my intention? Am I connecting to my child? right? Paying attention to the process. We have a right to know what is happening within our own home and to set house rules and to know the identity of guests who come into our home. Again, many parents, it's an interesting thing, get held hostage by their children's rage and anger at them. And I'm trying to free you up from that impulse to get small in the face of your child being upset. We have the right to assign our children chores and other family responsibilities appropriate to their ages. Again, I've said for years now that when our children manipulate us, when we accuse our children of manipulating us in the ways that these rights speak to, right? That really we've trained them their entire lives. They know our weaknesses. They know our vulnerabilities. You know, using the metaphor of a gun, you know, the bullets that we name that are our kryptonite. Like, I want to be a fair parent, or a loving parent, or a nurturing parent, a reasonable parent, right? We label those bullets that get used against us. All our child has to do is say, you're not fair, you're not reasonable, you don't care. And we innately respond to that. So when we let go of all of those things, when we learn to be right and just be ourselves, that's the essence of these rules. You get to be you. We have a right to promote time together as a family, which may include meals, outings, studying time, and other planned activities. I think about this one in relation to the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which many of you may have seen, where she tells the story of her childhood growing up in a Greek family and all its particular quirky versions of crazy and eccentricities. And then later on in life, she ends up repeating some of those same things and feels a certain kind of sweetness about it, right? Those family trips that we go on that as parents, it's so upsetting because our children are complaining. I talk about walking into Disneyland where it says this is the happiest place on earth. I'm thinking to myself, it's not my happiest place on earth as a parent. It's almost like the minute we cross the threshold, children start complaining. And so the idea here is that some of the things they might resent, some of the things they might not like, it's okay to require those things, and it might be actually some of the things that they appreciate. We have the right to be authoritative when a logical explanation and reasons have not succeeded. I think that a softer way that I might say that today is you're just allowed to be you. You're allowed to say, I'm not comfortable with this. This is the rule. I know it's not going to make sense. One of the weaknesses I've seen in programming over the years in therapeutic communities, wilderness therapy, residential therapy, is the efforts on the part of the staff to explain everything to the child. Right? Everything has to make sense. And it's okay to take a much more human approach to it and say, this is just what I'm comfortable with. This is just my level. This is just what I need to feel okay, to feel respected. So this is going to be my boundary. And that's the way I might say it today, whereas years ago I might have said it this way, to, again, empower the parent that feels disempowered. I'll talk about this idea of selfless parenting. This is something I've commented on. In fact, I was watching today, I was Googling something and actually found a quote of this from me in the Chicago Tribune. It's something I'm passionate about and spoke to and written about. This idea that we could be a selfless parent, right? That the statement, everything I do for you is for you. We sometimes people aspire to that, but there's a lot of problems with that. Number one, it reinforces a lack of empathy. See, if you don't show up as a person with unique needs and limits and boundaries and even limitations, your child doesn't have to learn to deal with one of the most difficult things in the world, and that is another person. If there's no self in it, if you don't have a self, then they don't have to deal with others. So at the core of this idea is the development of self, right? I have preferences, likes, dislikes, limits, boundaries, limitations, and I'm going to assert myself there. It reinforces this idea of the center of the universe thinking, right? That the child experiences themselves as the center of the universe. What I don't like about some of the language in parenting, the idea of like helicopter parenting, that concept of helicopter parenting, I've talked about that recently, is helicopter parenting. It's not the cause of children's kind of narcissistic presentation. It's evidence of a parent's anxiety and lack of self, right? It's evidence of, I need to make you happy, and I can't. In fact, my primary job as a parent is to make me happy in any relationship, right? And then to come to this relationship happy, quote unquote, so that I can be there to support you without compromising myself. It doesn't model self-love or self-care for your child, right? It ends up that they don't know, that they learn the value by watching you, to take care of themselves in a relationship. I mean, think about that. Think about your children in abusive relationships outside of the home, like with boyfriends, girlfriends, friends. And in your mind, you would step in, you would want to step in and empower your child to not allow them to be treated like that. But if they've watched you allow yourself to be treated that way, even by them, they don't have the wiring. They don't have the model. They don't have the template. So being, quote unquote, selfish, I don't call it that, finding a healthy kind of selfishness is actually a good model for your child. There's an idea from one of the original schools of family therapy called the invariant prescription. It was actually out of Milan, Italy. It's where we derive the name Milan Group in our program. And in Milan, what they would do is every time parents brought in a teenager or a child for treatment, the first assignment that every family would get, every set of parents would get, is go on vacation together. Leave the child with somebody that you trust. Doesn't have to be an expensive or exotic vacation, but go on vacation, go somewhere, and keep it a secret. Let the babysitter know, but keep it a secret from the child. And what these therapists were trying to do is create this boundary around the parents, right? And also talk about this idea that we don't have to, it's not even necessary or ideal or healthy to give up all of ourselves for our children. This idea of selfless parenting prevents differentiation by never allowing your child the opportunity to challenge you. In other words, if you're always doing everything for them, why would they ever be mad at you? They don't have a right to be mad at you. They would be crazy to be mad at you. All right? That's what that would mean. If I did everything for you, if everything I did was out of love for you, I'm basically saying you would be crazy to be angry or upset with me. And so the ideal that we sometimes strive for actually prevents development of self, development of separation, differentiation. Children need to be angry with us. That's kind of their job. They need to be upset with us. And it needs to be okay. And we need to be okay enough with ourselves that we allow our children to be angry with us. It's not honest. This idea is not honest, this idea of selfless parenting. It's not even true. That's what I mean by that. There are hidden strings attached for parents. They want something back in return: gratitude, appreciation, compliance. Right? It comes with expectations that are unspoken. The selflessness of connection and love is this idea that I talk about, where relationship intimacy, right? Being able to love the other person. The foundation of that is to love yourself, right? When I was in graduate school, there was this common question, which is, what comes first? Service to others or love of self? Half of the class would argue you have to love yourself before you can go out and love other people. The other half of the class would argue one of the ways that you find love in your life, find gratitude, find happiness, is to go out and serve other people, forget about yourself. And what I would say is they're the same thing. You can only love everybody else to the extent that you love yourself. Otherwise, it's something else. Selfless parenting is often needy. It often asks for something back. We're likely to leak and get our needs met in unhealthy, covert ways, unconscious ways. When parents come to me and they complain or describe their children as they moved into adolescence or later, that they don't look at me the same way. They don't like me anymore. They don't love me. And somehow this is evident. They're really angry with me, and they present that. And I say, well, there's something there. There's something important, but that can't be a measure of their mental health, right? It's not a measure of how healthy somebody is. That is, how angry they are at their parents is not a measure of their mental health. It tells us something, but it doesn't tell us that. A quote from my book: if you don't take care of yourself overtly, this is what I was saying, then you're likely to meet your needs in unhealthy and covert ways, such as depression or anxiety. If you're depressed, people are going to take care of you. You end up getting medication, doctor visits, attention, time, and energy from other people. And so in your attempt to be selfless, you have in fact engineered a way for yourself to be taken care of by other people. Your needs will be met one way or the other. They will leak. They will scream. They will awaken like Mr. Hyde if you don't learn how to attend to them. So it goes back to a fundamental idea. And this idea in this broadcast is the first ingredient, the first principle of getting the support that you need and deserve is to take it. To take care of yourself, to look at that as your first primary job. In order to surround ourselves with people who can love and support us in the way that we need, we first have to require it of them. This applies to family, friends, and professionals. It's scary and will bring up feelings of guilt. But in order to create a safe context for others, for ourselves, we will have to fight the old messages that tell us we have to be loyal or obligated to someone, even when there's a well-established pattern of mistreatment. And this applies to our children. It's very important that they have the experience of a human parent with human issues, and that be okay in the family, that the parent not be idealized or work to be idealized. So going to places of support, taking care of your anxiety, which is well deserved. Your children are doing things that are worrisome. They wouldn't be here if they weren't. To take care of your lack of peace and serenity, if it's depression, anger, frustration, take care of that somewhere else, and then you come back so that you're more capable of supporting your child. Go to Al-Anon, go to AA, go to codependency meetings, go to therapy, co-parenting, individual or family. I talk about this a lot. I can't stress it enough. I believe this, that the fact that people don't think they need therapy, to me, is one of the most powerful indications that they do need it. I had a colleague respond to me when I wrote something about that, and he said, I know I need it, so do I not need it? And I said, no, you just need it less than the people who think that they don't. Books, self-help, reading lists, following along with your child recommended by your therapist, step into their world a little bit, learn about their diagnosis, learn about your relationship to their diagnosis. Are they dealing with anxiety? Do they have an addiction or depression? So you learn about that, but most importantly, you learn about how to cope with somebody in your life that you love, care, and support, how to deal with them in the healthiest way, so you don't become a part of the dance that's a part of the problem. Going on vacations, literal or metaphorical. I've encouraged parents many times to continue with plans when their children were with us. I had parents in the early days that would sleep outside, literally, sleep outside in the cold, in sleeping bags, to prove to their children that they love them. And while I think that's a very courageous thing to do in some respects, it's not necessary. And sometimes the most courageous thing is to do battle with your guilt and to take care of yourself. And again, taking yourself, it can look like anything. That's why I don't think therapists ought to be very directive about it. We help you understand the principle, but sometimes taking care of yourself is showing up, and sometimes it's going somewhere else. Matching letters, you're not working harder than your child. If you're writing honest, authentic, caring, assertive letters, and your child is writing back something else, maybe not writing at all, putting no effort into it, not being honest, trying to punish you, it's okay to say, I'm here, I love you, and I'm ready to talk when you're ready to talk. That's a matching letter. Using parent mentors, parent reference lists. You know, the reason we came up with the parent mentor program is that years ago, one of our parents used the parent reference list like a mentor list. They called not just the first week, but throughout and developed relationships. And they came to us and suggested not just parent references to get into the program, but why don't you provide options for mentors? Because my parents that I've connected with have helped me all along the way, not just in the first couple of weeks. Some maxims around the issue of getting the support that you need and deserve. Trust is a gift earned on your terms. You don't have to apologize for not trusting the child. See, there's this idea that you can earn trust, right? We think about that all the time. You can earn my trust. The problem that I have with that is that everybody argues about whether or not they've earned it. Everybody debates. Well, I've done this and this and this, and I've gone through the program, and why can't I come home, and why can't I have that privilege? If you own trust, my trust that I have for you, I own it. I'm allowed to trust and not trust your word, what you say, that you're ready to come home, that you're ready to stay out as late as you want, so forth and so on. And it's just me. That's okay. But again, the reason that we do it the other way, the reason that we debate and justify our level of trust, try to prove that the percentage of trust that we have for our child and for others is right, is because we didn't grow up knowing it was just okay to be us. We grew up thinking we had to be right. And we're transferring that idea, that trauma, if you will, through the generations to our child. So owning it is okay. You're allowed to own it. You're allowed to have it. You have a right to be sad, to be heard, to ask your therapist tough questions. And what I mean by that is sometimes we therapists have a difficult time holding a parent's grief or sadness, and we try to talk you out of it. It's okay to assert yourself and ask your therapist to hear you. I wrote a blog called What to Look For in a Therapist on my own personal website, drbradreedy.com, where I talk about this idea, what it's like to be seen and heard by a therapist, and what it's like, when we're not seen or heard by our therapist. Forgiveness need not be rushed. You know, there's been this idea over the years that I've seen with parents and children where the offending party believes that forgiveness should come in certain terms at a certain time. And what I've always said is that forgiveness, like trust, is something you own. And the terms, the timing of forgiveness, the pace of it, is dictated by the person who was offended, not by the offender. Again, we have to really realize that we don't have to be right. We just have to be us. Now, a therapist can help you because they don't have a dog in the fight necessarily if you're holding on to something. I remember working with a father years ago who was incredibly punishing and punitive and sarcastic with his son in letters. His lack of forgiveness over and over each week, punishing his child. And in working with the father, I realized a lot of that was from his own childhood trauma, from his mother's alcoholism. And so he was taking that out. It was all stored up in there, and he was lashing out at his own son. And I said, it's okay to have that. That's real trauma. It really happened to you, but it's not about your son. And I wasn't encouraging the father actually to compromise any of the boundaries. I was just saying this emotional punishing that you're doing isn't about your son. It's about this other thing that happened to you. And he also had a brother that became an alcoholic later in life. You have a right to cut off conversations with unsupportive family and friends regarding placement and treatment of your child. You know, the more I learn in my work as a father, the less in agreement I am with the culture around me. I think about it differently. You think about it differently as you go through this work. And it's just okay to excuse yourself from those conversations. But somewhere in some of us, there's this sense of obligation and duty that we can't cut people off. Right? Again, our guilt rises up when we think about cutting somebody off. And I'm not talking about short fuses, quick triggers, cut everybody off at the first sign of disagreement or conflict. I'm talking about something that's more chronic than that. After you try to set a boundary, ask somebody for something, to stop doing or saying something. and then they continue to do or say that thing. What I'm suggesting, it's okay to say, well, it's kind of the agree to disagree. I'm not going to listen to that anymore. And if you can't support me by at least just respecting the different way that I want to approach it, then I'm going to have to cut this off. I believe passionately in that idea. You have a right to think over your answer. No future information is a valid answer, instead of lying or saying, I don't know. And this is more toward your children. I think, again, parents feel this pressure. It's about getting it right, being right, knowing everything, to answer immediately. And it's okay to say, I'll think about it. It becomes something that I see in our field area so often, where we often take time, right? We're not as compromised by your children as you are, just as you would not be as, I would be more compromised with my own children than you would, for example. So it's a family thing. And so we say things like no future information, or we'll think about that, or we'll consider that. I'll get back to you on that. And at first, that doesn't fly very well at all for most clients and students. But after a while, they adjust. And they realize it's just a part of being human. And I had one student conversation many years ago where a father actually knew the information. They'd already made a decision about aftercare for their son and where he would be going. 16-year-old young man. And so without me stopping him on the phone call, the family therapy phone call, the boy asked his father, he said, do you know where I'm going? And his father said, I don't know. We haven't talked about that yet. And the son said, Dad, it's okay. I know at home, if you had told me, but you knew what it was, but you weren't going to tell me, I would have raged against you. I would have punished you, beat you up over it emotionally. But instead of lying and saying you don't know, it's okay to say to me now, I've learned to deal with boundaries, and you can say to me, I do know, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. And I was blown away, right? In real time, this young man was teaching his father about boundaries and even owning his contribution in part, and his father not being forthright. It was really, really powerful. And so it's going to be scary. There could be an escalation, right? An extinction burst is what it's called in behavioral therapy, where the tantrum, the loudness increases initially after you set a boundary, but eventually they can learn to adjust to that. And it's great to practice while they're in our program, while they're at a program. It's not going to get easier. I said this to a parent not too long ago with her young adult son, and she was having a difficult time setting boundaries over the phone. He was at an aftercare setting in his early 20s, and I said, it's great time to practice now these boundaries. Not answering the phone, not responding to every anxious text, saying no to requests. It's okay to do that now. It will not get easier at home. You don't have to apologize for boundaries, consequences, or reactions, or your feeling. Right? That's, again, just about, it's okay to be you. That's why I think it's so important to go to those Al-Anon meetings, to go to therapy sessions in the presence of an empathic other where they support you being you. And you have an experience of somebody okay with you being you, so that you can carry that around with you, right? That's a lot of what I get out of my therapy, is I have this one voice, this one person in my head that tells me that I'm not crazy for being me. So that when I go out into the world and I show up and people say you're too loud, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that, I have this voice in the back of my head saying, you're okay. I try to summon that voice so that I can stand my ground, be who I am. That's, in my opinion, the real valuable stuff that happens in therapy, is being found, being listened to, being heard. If you have a therapist that's judging you, and many do, who's telling you the right way to be, and then you're not getting that out of that. You are relevant, you are important, you are valid. Your gut is good enough. What you feel is good enough. Your best is good enough. You are fallible, and you are good enough. It's called being a self. A couple of thoughts in conclusion. Harriet Lerner, in her book The Dance of Anger, described the energy of a system to return to the status quo as change back. This is the dynamic that one could expect after establishing a healthy new boundary in relationships. It's valuable to know that even our cherished loved ones will often resist change, Rare is the occasion when others celebrate our new boundaries, whether they're our children, partners, friends, or work associates. Still, this awareness can prepare us, this awareness of the change back energy. This awareness can prepare us for the ensuing pushback we get from our children when we set new boundaries. It took me a long time in my life to figure out that I was going to have to set a boundary to be okay, regardless of how everybody reacted around me. That was essentially the lesson that I learned that I talk about in chapter 1 of my book, when I went away to this program to find myself. I realized that I was trying to control everybody. And when you try to control everybody, how they feel, how they see me, then you don't show up honestly and authentically. And so this practice of honesty, this practice of boundary setting, this practice of taking care of oneself is not going to be met with riotous cheer. Some wise people in your life, the ones with greater capacity, a greater foundation themselves, will of course say to you, I would only want you to take care of yourself. I'm glad that you are. I think about that with my children as they grow up and grow older and become adults. If they came to me and they said, Dad, I don't want to talk to you. You're hurting me. This relationship isn't okay. I'm angry with you. My hope is that I could say, I'm sorry. I hope you'll talk to me about it, but I'll respect your boundary. If being around me compromises you, I don't want you around me. I want you to be okay. It's easy for us to think about that in relationship to other people in our lives, but it can be true with us too. I just invited somebody today to something I thought would be very helpful and beneficial for that person. And they described why they couldn't, why they were so overwhelmed with what they were doing, they just couldn't fit into their schedule. My response was, I'm glad not coming to this is your way of self-care, and I respect that. So preparing for the change back and knowing and yelling and whining and complaining and berating them and arguing and debating and insulting them, that's not a boundary. That's the lack of boundary. The boundary is walking away, walking into a new room, hanging up the phone, not responding, not debating, not arguing, not having the last word. At a graduation session with one family years ago, I noticed how each member of the family took a blaming posture toward each other. Each was looking at another, pointing out a fault, and asking that person to change. My final suggestion was this to them. Assume everyone else in the family is not going to change. Assume the others are going to continue to be their old idiot selves. Initially, the mother was angry with me, accusing me of being overly negative. I explained, I'm not being literal. I know all of you have made progress. But if you're expecting it to be easy, it's not going to work. You'll end up fighting about who is doing what and how much. If you let go of others changing, you will all contribute a lot more positivity to the process. And so we have great outcomes. At Evoke, I'm proud to say that our outcomes and our outcome research show that we, on average, have a 30% greater improvement in a child while they're with us than the industry average, the other wilderness therapy programs in the country. I'm proud of that fact. And this idea that expect that nobody around you is going to change. And I don't mean this kind of depressing, pessimistic outlook, but take responsibility for the change that you need to make, and that it's going to be scary. It's going to produce guilt. You're going to need support. You're going to need somebody in your life that can see you, be there with you, support you when you feel scared and alone. To move toward healthy parenting, we have to learn to feel the guilt and do the right thing for ourselves anyway, or we'll develop resentments and associate behaviors. So what are the take-homes? We have to do battle with guilt and shame. I think about that all the time. If you're not doing battle with guilt and shame, my idea was you're probably not stretching yourself. You're not outside of your comfort zone. And I don't think this is true with everybody, but I think it's true with most people. If you're not experiencing some guilt as you make some of these changes, you're probably not improving your self-care. You're probably not requiring people to treat you a certain way. You're probably not getting the support that you need and deserve. You have rights. Work with sponsors and therapists to see if these rights are based in fear and control. So some of the rights that I talked about earlier, if it's about this overwhelming sense of fear and this want to control everything, work with your therapist, work with your sponsor on that. Because if the boundary is set from a place of fear and control, it'll never work. If it's set from a place of authenticity, love, self, courage, clarity, it's hard for it to fail. In order to get the support you need and deserve, you'll have to require it. You cannot expect that others will give it to you just because you asked for it or stated it with a firm demand. I think that's the mistake again that we make, because when they do resist it, when they do it again, we get upset, resentful, blame them, try to punish them for it. The end result of getting this support that you need and deserve, of practicing it first with yourself and then with everybody else, is peace and serenity and freedom, a sense of empowerment. For me, as I stepped into that work a few years ago, and I still have a long way to go on that path, I suspect until the day that I die, it was like the whole world changed when I knew what the project was. When I knew that the project was me being courageous and strong, taking care of myself first, that it was nobody else's job to take care of me but me. And nobody else would really be there. I wouldn't be surrounded by people that supported me unless I did that for myself first. This process is evidence of a developing self, something that you need, we need, I need, and something that your child will benefit from. It's not intuitive. It's not what we were taught. It wasn't understood by those who taught us because they didn't know it either. It wasn't taught to them. The lack of doing this work of self-care, of self-development, of requiring other people to treat us in a way that we want to be treated, the lack of doing this will result in passive neediness. And it'll put your child at risk of taking care of you, right? Or giving up, which is what a lot of them have done because they're overwhelmed by it. So they resort to self-medication and abusive behavior toward you because they're angry at you for needing them to be a certain way. And if they do take care of you, they lose this sense of self. What Alice Miller in the drama of The Gifted Child talks about, this real self or authentic self. If you haven't read that book or listened to that podcast or watched that webinar yet, please do so. It is the deepest part of what I'm talking about tonight in the parent-child relationship. All right, I'm happy to take any live questions if any have come up. And if none have come up, let me go over the upcoming events, and then I'll have another opportunity for them. These are some of the groups that we want you to go to. We ask all parents to try to go to the best of their ability 6 of these support groups while your child is with us: Al-Anon, CODA, or Families Anonymous. You can also go to NAMI.org for classes or resources in your area that are affordable. The support groups that I mentioned are free. And if it's scary or uncomfortable, or you don't think that they're the right crowd for you, you don't think you need it, those are all of the same thoughts and feelings that your children have about coming here. So if nothing else, you get a sense of what it feels like to be invited into or thrust into the work that they're being invited or thrust into. You can listen to all of these broadcasts via the podcast app on your iOS device or iPhone. On your Android device, you can download the SoundCloud app and find them there. On a computer, you can go to soundcloud.com, and all of those platforms, just search Evoke Therapy Programs and subscribe there. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram using @EvokeTherapy. On Facebook, search Evoke Therapy Programs. You can also on Facebook find the Evoke Family Foundation. And there, it's an organization of alumni families that want to help people that can't afford treatment. You can become involved in that if you'd like. Go to our blog for new content, My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is available on Amazon. You can also get audio versions of it through Audible or Kindle version of it if you like. Upcoming intensives, if you want a deep dive. I recommend these. I do them myself. I've done them myself. My children, my wife has done these. So I recommend them strongly. My wife is doing one coming up again. It's just it's an incredible process to get into ourselves. It's powerful emotionally, and each time I do it, I come away with something big. Our version of it is called Finding You. The next one is June 6th through 10th. We still have some spots available, so contact intensives@evoketherapy.com if you want more information. We're doing a Finding You too by popular request, October 10th through 14th, so that will fill up for sure. So contact us, let us know if you plan to come. And then we're going to have an alumni intensive coming up, something brand new. We haven't done it yet, where we invite anyone that's 18 years or older, regardless of when they came to the program, to come and do an intensive if they'd like to revisit their work. And we'll open that up only to alumni, clients, and students, the children. We can do private family intensives that are customized. The next professional groups, if you're a professional in the therapeutic industry, even private practice, you're invited to come do one with other professionals. The next women's one is May 20th through 22nd. That's actually this weekend. And then the next men's one where there's an opening is June 10th through 12th. Again, contact us at intensives@evoketherapy.com. The next support group that we have on the calendar is Monday, June 4th, 7 to 9, Midtown at CUNY. Contact Melanie at evoketherapy.com if you want more information or to RSVP. Next workshop, we ask if you possibly can, while your child is with us, if you're current Evoke family, to come to one of our workshops. The next one is June 23rd and 24th. Multifamily, experiential, educational. You can combine that with a field visit if your Evoke therapist says that the timing is right clinically. Contact Gail at evoketherapy.com for more information. Pursuits are adventure trips for families or adults, young adults. Think therapy light or sober fun. And I'm happy to go over any questions that have come in. One parent says, I'm trusting this process. Your webinars are making that so. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for all you give to the success of Evoke. Thank you very much. Do you offer programs for 12-year-old boys? My daughter's brother could use this too. One of the possibilities is a family pursuits trip. You can have therapists come out for that. Those are anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks. Sometimes talk to our admissions staff about that. We legally can have 12-year-olds in our Oregon program, the Cascades program, and we've made exceptions based on diagnoses, and there's one group in particular that has it, so talk to our admissions folks about that. In Utah, they have to be 13. So that's my answer to that. And these workshops, yes, these workshops are in Utah. They're in Park City, Utah. So you fly into Salt Lake, it's about 20 minutes from the airport. It's all inclusive. So you stay with us, we feed you, we do the work in the lodge, the Evoke Summit Lodge. So yes, they're in Park City. Can I put the workshop screen back up? Oh, these workshops. Well, it depends if you're talking about the workshop. Sorry, I need to clarify. The workshops, one is at Entrada and one is at Cascades, and we kind of switch every other month. If you're talking about the Finding You intensives, these intensives, the next one being June 6th through 10th, those are in Utah. Those are at our Park City cabin. So depending upon which one you were talking about, that's where they're at. Oh, great. All right, folks, thank you for joining us. Thank you for and on behalf of your children for doing the work that you do. Like I said, I just did a men's professional intensive recently, and I realized after watching a couple of these men that are experienced, intelligent, well-functioning, high-functioning people do their work, I realized it doesn't really matter what the work is. It's just important that they're doing it. It changes you just to be doing your own work. I spoke in Denver yesterday at a luncheon with 40 professionals and said the same thing. If you're in the therapeutic field and you're not doing your work, I don't know that you can be trusted to take your clients to where they need to go. That's just my opinion and my experience as a therapist and somebody who's run this program for 20 years. That's just my experience. My next broadcast will be Monday, May 21st. It's for new families. So if you want to join in your experienced family, happy to have you. Happy to have your comments or questions. But we'll be doing this because this will be the one that we give to our new families. The one after that, the one that will happen on Wednesday, is going to be an introduction broadcast that you can use to share with your friends and family. So you can invite them into it. Extended friends and family are welcome to attend. You can pass out the password, and they can ask questions. They can ask challenging questions of me. You can send in questions in advance for them, and I'd be happy to address them. So thank you, folks. It's great talking to you tonight. Again, thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you Monday. Take care. Bye-bye.